Remember Donald Trump? Sure you do. Guy with the hair? The man who was always in the headlines, whether for his business ventures, his reality TV show, or his time in the Oval Office. He was a larger-than-life figure who seemed to thrive on controversy and attention. Anyway, he was really big on this idea of trade wars. He believed that America was being taken advantage of by other countries, especially when it came to trade. He often talked about how the US was losing billions of dollars because of unfair trade practices. Basically, he thought America was getting a raw deal on trade with other countries, especially China. He saw the trade deficit, the difference between what America imports and exports, as a sign that the US was being ripped off. So, what did he do? He decided to take matters into his own hands. He believed that by imposing tariffs, he could level the playing field. He slapped tariffs, which are like taxes on imported goods, on billions of dollars worth of Chinese products. These tariffs were meant to make Chinese goods more expensive, encouraging Americans to buy domestically produced items instead. The idea was to make American-made stuff cheaper and protect American jobs. By making foreign goods more expensive, he hoped to boost American manufacturing and create more jobs at home. You know, make America great again and all that jazz. It was a central theme of his campaign and presidency, appealing to those who felt left behind by globalization and technological change. Trump figured China would cave under pressure and give America a better deal. He believed that the Chinese economy was more dependent on the US than vice versa, and that they would have no choice but to negotiate. Spoiler alert, things didn't exactly go according to plan. The Chinese government retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting American products like soybeans and automobiles, which hurt American farmers and manufacturers. The problem is, trade wars aren't exactly a walk in the park. They're more like a high-stakes game of tug-of-war, where both sides are pulling with all their might, but neither is willing to let go. They're more like a messy food fight, where everyone ends up covered in mashed potatoes and bad blood. The longer it goes on, the messier it gets and the harder it is to clean up. And as we all know, nobody wins in a food fight. The economic damage can be widespread, affecting not just the countries involved, but also their trading partners and the global economy as a whole, except maybe the guy filming it for YouTube. In the end, the trade war became a spectacle, something for people to watch and comment on, but with real consequences for businesses and consumers around the world. Now, China wasn't just going to sit there and take a tariff whipping lying down. They had their own strategies and plans to counteract the economic pressure being applied by the United States. They're not exactly known for their passive-aggressive approach to international relations. Instead, they prefer a more direct and assertive stance, especially when it comes to protecting their economic interests. So they retaliated, because that's what countries do when they feel cornered or threatened. It's a classic move in the playbook of international diplomacy and trade wars. China slapped tariffs on American goods, targeting key industries like agriculture, automobiles and technology. They knew exactly where to hit to cause the most pain. Remember those soybean farmers Trump promised to help? They were among the hardest hit. Soybeans were a major export to China, and the tariffs made it nearly impossible for American farmers to compete. Yeah, they weren't too thrilled when China basically stopped buying their soybeans. Oops, it wasn't just soybeans though. Other agricultural products like pork and dairy were also affected. This back-and-forth tariff tango went on for a while, escalating tensions between the world's two largest economies. Each side kept upping the ante, hoping the other would back down first. It was like watching a really expensive game of chicken, except nobody was sure who was going to swerve first. The stakes were incredibly high, and the potential fallout was enormous. And the longer it went on, the more everyone else started to worry. Global markets were jittery, businesses were uncertain about the future, and consumers were caught in the crossfire. The ripple effects of this trade war were felt far and wide, impacting economies around the world. Factories in both countries faced slowdowns or closures. Workers were laid off, and supply chains were disrupted. The uncertainty made it difficult for companies to plan for the future, and many had to make tough decisions to stay afloat. Public opinion was divided. Some supported the tough stance on China, believing it was necessary to protect American jobs and industries. Others criticized the approach, arguing that it was hurting more than helping. Economists and trade experts weighed in, offering various perspectives on the potential outcomes and long-term effects. Some predicted a resolution would come eventually, while others warned of a prolonged conflict with no clear end in sight. In the end, it was a complex and multifaceted issue with no easy answers. The trade war between the US and China was a stark reminder of how interconnected and interdependent the global economy truly is. As the world watched and waited, the hope was that cooler heads would prevail and a mutually beneficial agreement could be reached. Until then, the tariff tango continued, with no clear winner in sight. In the midst of this trade war chaos, China decided to up the ante. They imposed a whopping 75% tariff on certain US goods. I mean, we're talking serious tariff territory here. This was a bold move, even for China. Basically, they were calling Trump's bluff, saying, "Okay, you want to play hardball? Let's play." It was a clear signal that China wasn't backing down, and they were willing to weather the storm. The 75% tariff sent shockwaves through the global economy. It was like someone had just chucked a grenade into a swimming pool full of rubber duckies. Suddenly, everyone was scrambling for cover, worried about the fallout. Here's the thing about trade wars. They don't just hurt the countries directly involved. They create a ripple effect that extends far beyond borders, affecting economies and lives in ways that are often unforeseen. They have this nasty habit of spilling over and impacting everyone else. It's like throwing a stone into a pond. The ripples spread outwards, touching everything in their path. Think of it like a chain reaction, where one tariff leads to another, and suddenly the entire global economy is caught in a downward spiral. One country's decision to impose tariffs can lead to retaliatory measures from another, creating a domino effect that disrupts global trade. Businesses around the world felt the pain as supply chains were disrupted and uncertainty loomed large. Factories had to halt production because they couldn't get the parts they needed, and cargo ships were left stranded at sea, unable to dock and unload their goods. Remember that time you couldn't find your favorite brand of toilet paper because of the pandemic? That was just a glimpse of what trade wars can do. They can cause similar supply chain headaches, leading to shortages of everyday items that we often take for granted. Yeah, trade wars can cause similar supply chain headaches. Ports become congested with cargo ships waiting to unload, supermarket shelves go empty, and workers in factories find themselves with nothing to do because the materials they need are stuck in transit. The trade war also fueled uncertainty in financial markets, making investors jittery and businesses hesitant to make long-term plans. Stock markets fluctuated wildly, and the economic instability made it difficult for companies to forecast their future. It was like trying to build a house of cards in the middle of a hurricane. The winds of uncertainty were strong, and no one knew when or where the next gust would come from. Businesses struggled to stay afloat, and the global economy teetered on the brink of collapse. The political landscape was equally turbulent. Protests erupted as people demanded solutions, news anchors debated the implications of the trade war, and politicians argued over the best course of action. It was a chaotic time, with no easy answers in sight. Small businesses were hit particularly hard. Many had to close their doors for good, unable to withstand the economic pressure. Families worried about their financial future, and once bustling commercial districts turned into ghost towns. Eventually, international leaders came together to negotiate new trade agreements, and slowly but surely, the wheels of global commerce began to turn again. Cargo ships resumed their journeys, factories restarted production, and supermarket shelves were restocked. The recovery was gradual, but it brought a sense of relief. People returned to shopping in busy markets, the stock market began to recover, and workers went back to their jobs. The scars of the trade war remained, but the world had learned valuable lessons about the interconnectedness of our global economy. In the end, the trade war served as a stark reminder of how interconnected we all are. It showed us that the actions of one country can have far-reaching consequences, and that cooperation and collaboration are essential for a stable and prosperous global economy. As the sun rose on a new day, there was hope that the lessons learned would lead to a more resilient and united world. Remember those tariffs Trump slapped on Chinese goods? Well, guess what? Those costs eventually trickle down to someone, and that someone is often the average American consumer. Because tariffs are like hidden taxes, they can drive up the prices of everyday goods, from clothes and electronics to cars and groceries. So, while Trump talked a big game about protecting American jobs, many Americans found themselves paying more for basic necessities. Not exactly the Make America Great Again outcome anyone had in mind. The trade war highlighted the interconnectedness of the global economy and the fact that protectionist policies often come with unintended consequences. The trade war between the US and China also had geopolitical implications. It forced other countries to choose sides, potentially straining alliances and reshaping global power dynamics. Some countries, like those in the European Union, found themselves caught in the crossfire trying to maintain good relations with both the US and China. It was like being stuck in the middle of a messy divorce, where everyone wants you to pick a side. The trade war underscored the growing rivalry between the US and China, not just in terms of economics, but also in terms of global influence and power.